Welcome back to the Game or Die podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Moore, for episode 66. So what I've been playing lately is I was kind of in a little bit of a funk with gaming. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to play after I played the Guitar Hero series and a couple other games in the beginning of January. And now that it's actually March now, but in February, I was really kind of struggling with what I want to play because I've been traveling a lot now, and that's going to continue for the foreseeable future. I'm going to be back and forth in California multiple times throughout each month. So I am just trying to figure out what I really want to play. And for whatever reason, I kind of got stuck on a new franchise. It's actually an old franchise, but I've been playing through it, and I started playing through the Mario Kart series. Why? I don't honestly know. Mario Kart has been a part of my life since the original Super Nintendo when it came out. I remember really getting into it. So I think I was like kind of looking at some music to play on the other podcast that I do, the Couch Money podcast. I'm starting to do radio episodes, and so playing a lot more gaming music. And so I was trying to find some gaming music, and I think I came across some of the newer DLC for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And I was like, oh man, yeah, some of these old classic Mario Kart songs are actually really cool. And so I wanted to play some Mario Kart, but I was like, dude, if I'm going to play Mario Kart, which one do I play? And then I was like, well, they're not very long. If you just play it single player, you can get through each of those games pretty quickly. So I just decided to start with Super Nintendo because that's the one I have played. Out of the ones that I have played, which are most of them except for the mobile versions, I haven't played the Super Nintendo one in the longest amount of time. So I started with that, and the Super Nintendo version is rad because obviously it's the beginning of the series. It has the Mode 7 tracks. Everything is flat. It's kind of a little bit weird with the fact that if you play it in single player, it's still, the screen is split into two parts. The top portion is your normal view like you were playing, and the bottom view is not like something that you would normally see. But because I'm assuming the graphics were so intense and the power that needed to draw all those pixels and things like that, they needed to shrink the screen size down. So they split it into two parts. The top view is your normal player view, and then the bottom part is a map. And it's really weird. And I remember when that first came out and I was like, oh, that kind of sucks that I don't get the full screen effect. You know, you want the screen as big as you possibly can, especially back when TVs were a lot smaller. You would have a 15-inch TV and half of the screen real estate is taken up by a map of the course. So I remember kind of being a little bit bummed about that. And then when I got back to it this time around, I was like, oh, that's right. So I kind of had to tilt my neck up a little bit to view the top of the screen when I'm playing on a projector. And I was just like, this isn't as fun as I remember, but the courses are really good. I did have a really good time with it. And the music is just, I'm going to talk a lot about the music in this series because it is really good for the most part. There are some levels in some of the games where I go, man, the music has just dropped off. It either feels very generic or it's more ambiance. And that's kind of where the ghost levels or tracks come into play, where you don't get a musical track. You just kind of get ambiance and this weird like droning. And I've never liked the ghost houses in Mario series to begin with. So those are the tracks that I kind of least liked. But pretty much everything else, like there's the Donut Plains tracks and stuff like that. Those levels themselves are really fun because I remember they put in like little areas where you can, if you have like a super mushroom, you can speed through the grass, because if you go off course at all in this game, you slow to a crawl. It is like you are driving through a molasses mud swamp. It is crazy how quickly and how massively you slow down in those games when you veer off course, even just a tiny bit. So if you got a super mushroom, there's a break in the railway that you can zoom through, and you can cut off like 15% of the level, like 3 massive turns, just by zooming through it. But you got to have the right power-ups. And I'll talk about power-ups in just a little bit here with the series. But I'm going to kind of just go through each game in the series because that's what I did. I played all of the games in the series of Mario Kart. So I played through the Super Nintendo one. And what I did originally was I started off with the highest CC that you can, which is on Super Mario Kart 100cc. And when I saw the credits, that's where I kind of capped off, hey, I played through the game. Because when you play through, especially the original games, you don't get anything out of playing through the same courses multiple times. They have a CC level, which is for the actual engine size of the engines. I remember when I had my motorcycle, I had a Kawasaki Ninja, and it was a 250cc, a little tiny small bike. And that bike kind of was my first bike. And then I graduated to a real roadster type of bike, and that was a 600cc, I believe. And obviously they make a lot more higher powered engines, but that's kind of what those CC, like 150cc and all that mean, is just the size of the engine and how powerful it is. So I started off with the 100cc on Super Nintendo, and then I moved on to the Nintendo 64 version. And I remember when the Nintendo 64 version came out, and it's kind of weird. The naming scheme of the Mario Kart series has kind of always been a little bit weird and wonky to me. They called the Super Nintendo one Super Mario Kart because that's what they used to do all the time. But with Mario games, most of the time they'll use the word super in there, but not for the offshoots, not for like Mario Tennis or Mario Kart or anything like that. And so when I went to go look for the 64 version of Mario Kart, it's just called Mario Kart 64. And I was thinking it was Super Mario Kart 64 because, man, I don't keep track of the naming of these games. I grew up with them. I've owned them multiple times. It's just not something that's like, especially because I am a very big proponent of alphabetizing and organizing collections. If you have a series or a franchise, it should be named relatively similar so that it doesn't create a lot of confusion. And when you catalog them, when you put them on a shelf or put them in a piece of software to organize them all, they should all in the same series kind of be lumped together. When they're not, it bugs the crap out of me. So Mario Kart 64 is the name of the game, and I was looking for Super Mario Kart 64 and even typing up like notes and stuff like that for this podcast. I typed Super Mario Kart 64, but it's just called Mario Kart 64. I remember when this game came out, and I was at Costco with my best friend, and they had a demo station of this game, and I remember playing it while we were at Costco with his family for whatever reason. I think it was just a normal shopping trip or something. And like we played this, and it was just like mind blowing of how cool this game was, that Mario Kart's now in 64 bits, Mario Kart's now in 3D. But it's kind of weird because yes, the levels are in 3D, but the characters are not. They're still sprite based. And I'm not really sure why. Maybe it's just because the technology wasn't there yet. They weren't comfortable with making all these characters in 3 dimensions with all these polygons. Maybe it just was not able to be done because of the power limitations. But it's really weird because Nintendo was on this big pre-rendered graphics character design. You know, you had at the time Donkey Kong Country series, where Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong and Dixie Kong and Kitty Kong and Cranky Kong and Funky Kong and all the Kongs were, and even the characters in the game were all 3D rendered versions. And people look back at them now and say it's terrible. I remember being a kid and not having a problem with it. I thought it was really cool. And even now, I am one of the rare people who go, no, I have no problem with the way that they look. It's a design that maybe doesn't look very great today compared to what it could have been, but we had sprites for all these years. We had those things. So something a little bit new and different is totally fine. And those games are looked back upon as some of the best platformers of all time anyway. So I don't see a big issue with the pre-rendered graphics. Like even when you're doing the character select for Mario Kart 64, they look cool. They don't render great in high definition or anything like that, but that's not that big of a deal. And there's definitely people who are doing creative solutions to these things in the modding scene. I just saw something probably about 3 months ago where they said, hey, we did Mario Kart HD, Mario Kart 64 HD, where they re-rendered the entire game in high definition and basically rebuilt the game, I guess, or maybe the assets. It looks phenomenal, but it also looks kind of fake, you know, because it just doesn't look like the game that we grew up with. It doesn't look like the real game. It just looks kind of too clean, too cleaned up in certain aspects. And that's one of those things that I always just have kind of a problem with games like that, where, or at least the HD projects and stuff like that, when you are re-rendering or recreating these things that have flaws and you upscale them, especially with this new AI technology that people are just losing their minds about. They are kind of cleaning up too much to the point where it feels artificial. And hey, it's AI produced. Artificial intelligence is artificially produced to the point where it doesn't look the same anymore. It feels off. It's getting into a new version of the uncanny valley. It's really weird and it's kind of hard to describe. But basically, I have just like this deterrent in my mind whenever I see that type of stuff. I go, oh, I don't want to even look at it. And one of the best examples that I can think of is during Christmas, I always watch a lot of, I'm sorry for this tangent, but hey, it's relative. During Christmas, I always watch Will Vinton's Christmas special. And it's the Claymation Christmas special. Will Vinton is a claymation designer and artist. He's the guy who came up with the California Raisins commercials and the specials and all that. So like stop motion California Raisins. I always watched and loved the Claymation Christmas special with the two dinosaurs that introduce all the different, Christmas songs and all that. Even the California Raisins are part of it too. And I saw someone last year create an AI upscaled version of it. And when you watched it, because I grabbed it, I downloaded it, I was like, oh yeah, 1080p version of Christmas, Claymation Christmas? Yeah. And I watched it and I went, oh, this looks bad. And it's not like it looks bad in the sake of, oh, this looks terrible. This looks bad. It looks off-putting because it is removing the inherent flaws of 80s stop motion, which is not a bad thing. It's an art form, first of all. So, hey, those flaws maybe were not meant to be there, but it's part of the overall characteristic and design of that art itself. You look at, anything stop motion animated now is always like that, where it doesn't look 100% perfect. But that's okay. It doesn't need to be. It is part of the art. And so I kind of feel the same way when I look at these new HD versions. Like with the Will Vinton Christmas special, you would see in the original version, you would see thumbprints and lines and creases. But when that person threw it into the AI upscaler, instead of going, oh, this is a part of the art piece where the person pressed their fingers into the clay to move and squish it around to create a new smile or something in that frame, it just cleans it up and removes any of those imperfections. And when you watch it, you go, dude, this doesn't look right. A, because you know what it originally looks like. And B, it looks fake because it is. It's basically redrawing over. It's using the original film frame as a template. And then it's kind of like a paint by numbers where it's just a clean, solid color as opposed to shading and lighting and all that stuff that goes into it too. So it's just a little bit weird. And again, I didn't want to go too off into a tangent, but I think it is relative to these HD remakes and stuff and conversations. Like, hey, don't remove what made this thing unique. But Mario Kart 64 is a really good game. It's interesting going back and playing it, going, oh, that's right. The characters are sprites in a 3D world. It's a little bit weird. And then I moved on to the Game Boy Advanced version, which is called Super Circuit. This is a game that I had zero experience with. I never played the Game Boy or the mobile versions of Mario Kart. Why would I, right? Back in the day, you would always think of the mobile versions of franchise games as the inferior product, the mobile version, like, oh yeah, it's like the watered down version. So I played this and I actually really liked it, finally playing it and seeing what the game is really like, because it kind of goes back to the Super Nintendo style. It has, the sprite characters. It has the flat Mode 7 style graphics to it for all the courses. And I think some of the courses are really good. They're some of my favorites, in fact. I would say there's about maybe 3 or 4 really good tracks that are original tracks in that Game Boy Advance game. And then they also started something with that Game Boy Advance series. They started doing retro tracks, remakes. And this is kind of something that's been going on since that Game Boy Advance game, where they will have all new courses for the main cups: Mushroom, Fire Flower Cup, Star Cup, and then the Special Cup. So you have 4 circuits to complete, or cup tracks, which have 4 courses in them. And then they started introducing the retro cups, and the retro cups are all kind of like, I don't remember which ones they are for which games, but it's a lot of them over the course of this series. And it's really interesting to be able to see the different additions or subtractions or just new tweaks that they do to these courses over the course of the series, because each game kind of takes a handful of older courses and redoes them in its own style, which is really interesting. But I like that. I think that's really unique. It gives more to the game itself, instead of just saying, here's, if you got 4 courses and 4 tracks, or 4 cups with 4 tracks each, that's it. That's all you get. But with these newer games, they started adding the retro cups as well. And so you get remakes of older courses, which are cool. And then I went through and started playing the GameCube version, which is called Double Dash. And this is my favorite Mario Kart game, which is weird because I hate the GameCube. I think it's a terrible system. And I know a lot of people, especially now, it's like It's now in that new retro phase where all the people who grew up having GameCubes as their first video game console and system, because Nintendo's always been the family-friendly video game system and makers. So when you're a kid, whatever console is around at the time of you being a pretty young kid, from probably I'd say 7 to 13, whatever console is out, that's your favorite console of all time. It's kind of weird. I haven't really thought about that too much, but that's usually the way it goes. And I saw that when I had the gaming store, because I would have people younger than me start coming in and asking for 64. And they were in, high school, early college. And they go, "Oh my gosh, 64! That was the console, man. Yo, bro, that was the dopest console, because that's the console that I grew up with. That was my first console." And a couple years before, it was the Super Nintendo. Everyone was coming in. Kids, people my age were either Nintendo or Super Nintendo as their first console, and then at a point, it just turned to Nintendo 64. And then at a certain point after that, it turned into GameCube. And you see this cycle of nostalgia waves that come in, where in a few years from now, I'd say probably in about 2 years from now, we're going to see a lot more people reminiscing about the Wii as the best console of all time, which, again, I completely disagree with. But hey, they wanted their own personal favorite console. That's fine. I don't care about that. I'm just saying, statistically speaking, the best console of all time, that's a different conversation altogether. But the GameCube, I'm not a fan of. I don't think that there was that many good games. There were a few, but this was in the time period when you had the big three. You had Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo. Nintendo had the GameCube, Sony had the PlayStation 2, and Microsoft had the Xbox. I was an Xbox person. I still am. If we're talking consoles, not PC, because I'll play PC 99.9 with a line over it times out of 10, because most of the time that's the best version. But just like what I just said, what's the best version of the game? That's what I care about. In Microsoft, the Xbox had the best version of multi-platform games. Hands down, bar none, it's not up for discussion. It's a fact. It's not an opinion. Go to any multi-platform game in that generation. I think it's the 7th generation. I could be wrong. I think it's 6th or 7th. I believe it's 7th. But maybe it's the 6th. I can't remember. But the original Xbox, PlayStation 2, and GameCube, that generation of consoles, any multi-platform game was 100% better and the best on the Xbox. It was just because it was so much more powerful. You had the hard drive. You had custom soundtrack capability, 5.1 Dolby Digital surround sound, like 480p progressive for pretty much anything. There was a couple games, I believe, that did 720p. The console could go up to 1080i. Like, it was just the best and most powerful console. And so I didn't really pay attention to GameCube or PlayStation 2 unless it was an exclusive. And with the GameCube, boy, there was not a lot of exclusive games that I was interested in. I was not a fan of Metal Gear, so I didn't really care about that. I was not a fan of Resident Evil, so I didn't care about that. I hate, and I say hate, not hated. I still hate Mario Sunshine. I think it is the worst Super Mario game. And again, that's something that I can maybe discuss at a later date. And I know a lot of people love that game. Again, it's fine if you like that stuff. I don't have a problem with someone liking something different than I like. If I say I hate something, I can hate it. That's my personal opinion. It's okay to have different opinions about stuff. But I don't like the GameCube. I don't like any of those exclusives. But man, there is something special about Double Dash. It could be, and it is partly because of the connection that I have with that game, because it was one of the very few games that I played with my sister, who is a lot younger than me and also not into gaming pretty much at all. Like, there's only a couple games that she was ever interested in, and Double Dash was one of them. I remember going to EB Games or GameStop, whatever it was, when Double Dash came out, buying it, bringing it home, and putting it on. My sister came into my room and was like, "Hey, what's that?" And I was like, "It's Mario Kart." And she's like, "Oh, cool." And I hooked up a secondary controller because it was a multiplayer co-op multiplayer racing game, which is unheard of. Every multiplayer game is all competitive, and I've never been that type of competitive person. I just don't have that in me. So whenever there's a multiplayer game that kind of bucks that trend and goes co-op multiplayer, like, I gravitate towards it. I really try to enjoy it. And with Double Dash, I did, because you have a cart that holds two characters. One player focuses on the driving, the other player focuses on the power-ups. And it's really cool too, because that was the first one where they introduced not just the double dashing and the drifting. It's a different type of drift component as opposed to the other ones where you bounce the cart up and then kind of skid across. But with Double Dash, you kind of bump the back end out and slide it out a little bit. And it's a very different style of maneuvering through the game. And it's really, really cool. I'm so happy with it in the way that it plays. And then they also introduced the double power-up, where you can get 2 question mark blocks, 2 different power-ups, and hold one off and then have another one. And you can switch them out and stuff like that. And it's a really interesting game that it's a bummer they never went back to that style. With the next one, the DS version, they kind of reverted back to the 64 and Game Boy Advance style. And it was a bummer because, man, I think Double Dash, that concept, that multiplayer co-op concept, was really, really strong. So I really enjoyed my time with GameCube. I thought it was just a blast. There were some courses in there that are just, I think the design of the game, because it's a multiplayer co-op, because there's 2 people playing at once on a system that could have 4 people, the courses are designed in a really specific way that no other Mario Kart series or games or courses were designed that way. So when I went from Game Boy, Super Nintendo, 64, Game Boy Advance into Double Dash, and then out of Double Dash into the DS, Wii, 3DS, and the Switch versions, there's a distinct style that you go, this is a GameCube course. This is a Double Dash course. It is more condensed, and the energy for that game is just so off the walls. It is such a hyper course. It's so tense. I think it's called the Waluigi Stadium. It's a dirt bike, stadium course like the Wario Stadium in 64. But it is more condensed. It has more jumps, and it is just a smaller course. And pretty much the entire time you're playing it, it is just things are happening the entire time. From the get-go, people are flying, hurling things at you. You're getting struck by lightning. You're hitting blue shells. You're getting thrown blue shells at you. People are passing you, people are hitting you, people are running through with the star power up, people are using the bullet bill power up. You get the bullet bill power up if you're too far behind. It's incredible. It's crazy. So I really, really, really like the GameCube version. It's fantastic. Then I moved on to the DS version, which again is a mobile version, which I didn't have any experience with. And when I played it, I hated it. And I played this on an emulator on a big screen projection, massive screen. So it was and you can upscale it too, which is really nice. So it makes it look a lot nicer and then it plays fine. But the biggest issue is that this game was brutal. It was unfun to play. And this is where they really ramped up the rubber banding. And my wife was watching me play these games throughout the course of a few days. And she was like, "Oh, you're playing Mario Kart again?" I'm like, "Yeah." And I would get into a game or a course or a track, and I would have to reload the state because I would be right at the very end and I would get hit with a blue shell after being in first the entire game or entire course, and then hit with a blue shell and immediately be thrown into fifth place. That happened pretty much on every track for every cup. And I was so mad, and she's like, "You're cheating." I'm like, "No, we could get into it's another conversation." But I was like, "No, I'm just restarting the race because I was in first the entire time and I got hit with one item, and the computer has this rubber banding, so it makes it more competitive. But it's artificial. It's fake. I should not be punished for doing well in the game." And I had this conversation with a couple of my friends on through text last week, where I said, "I'm playing through the Mario Kart game and I'm just having a really bad time with this version or this game or whatever." And we kind of went back and forth a couple times with the fact that Mario Kart employs rubber banding and certain power-ups to, in their mind, it creates a more balanced race experience for unexperienced racers and experienced racers. So everyone's kind of on the same level up until a point. But if you're good and you know the course layout and you know how to boost and all that fun stuff, and you're just good at the game hinders you and penalizes you and punishes you for being good at the game. You could be, and this happened throughout the entire game, you can be in first place the entire race, all three tracks, all three laps, and then at the very, very, very end, you could get hit with a blue shell, or you can get hit with 100 blue shells. I got hit with 3 blue shells in one race, and at the very, very end, I got hit with that third blue shell and I lost. And the game would not just hit me with a blue shell. It would be a consecutive 3 different things at the same time, or one right after the other. It would usually be get hit with lightning, then a blue shell, and then as soon as I regain control, a red shell. I'm like 15 seconds in front of everyone. But by the time I get hit by lightning, spin out, get hit with the blue shell, blow up, and then start driving and then get hit with a red shell and then get spun out again, and then start driving, I would go from a 15-second gap to being in 5th place, right at the very end of the finish line on the 3rd lap. That happened almost every single race. That happened multiple times per race in certain cases, where even before the first lap was completed, and this is on a couple of the other games too. I'm talking also about the Wii, where I would be in a race, before I even completed the first lap, I got hit with 2 different blue shells. And again, that consecutive, it would be either lightning, blue shell, red shell, or blue shell, lightning, red shell, or lightning, red shell, red shell. A combination of a different variations of that combination. And it was just like, dude, you gotta be kidding me. This is so unfair. I'm doing good at this game and now I lost the race. And I have to repeat it because I was good and I just got hit with a bunch of crap at the very end. So I really disliked my time with the DS Mario Kart. And then same thing, and this happened when the Wii version came out. I was living in Colorado at the time. The Wii version of Mario Kart came out, Mario Kart Wii. And I've always had a real big issue with the Wii, not from kind of a design aspect, because they put so much emphasis on the motion controls of the Wii, which, take it or leave it, whatever. I think they're garbage for the most part. But there are a few games that, implement that type of stuff well, or is as interesting at least. But for the most part, I hate motion controls. And when they started making Mario Kart Wii and giving out the plastic wheel shell, it's literally a piece of plastic. And they acted like it was this new approach to video games, like the second coming, the new sliced bread type of way of playing video games. So I'm like, dude, this is literally just a plastic circle that you put the controller in. There's nothing else about it. You could duct tape the Wiimote to a stick and achieve the exact same thing by holding it up in the air and twisting your arms and pretending you're driving. There's no uniqueness to it. It was just a piece of plastic. And it sold billions of copies and all this stuff. People bought that thing. It's like one of the highest grossing video games of all time because people lost their mind over a white plastic circle. And I was just so mad about that at the time. And the other reason why is because I found that game, when I originally played it, my complaint was it was way too easy. I got in 100%. I guess over the years, because it was an online game as well, they did some updates to it and did a lot of balancing. And playing through it now, I had such a bad time with it because of the rubber banding, just like the DS. So much rubber banding that it made me rage quit. It made me just go, yeah, I'm done. I'm done with this right now, and just turn it off in the middle of a race because I was so frustrated with the game cheating and punishing me for being good at the game. And then it also introduced motorcycles, which I was not a fan of. I still am not. I think it's a really bad implementation. And I was really mad too because I remembered this is the last cup of the game. I'm playing through and I'm going, oh my gosh, this is the last cup. Good. I'm so done with this game. And doing the motorcycles and hitting a jump and then doing something, I can't remember what it was, but then, or I was driving along and I see the other characters on motorcycles, they're doing wheelies and they're boosting. And I went, oh, that's right. There's boosts in this game. There's manual boosts that you can do throughout the entire game, every single moment of every single course, without a super mushroom. How do you do that? And I paused the game really quick. I looked it up on my phone and went, oh, that's right. Like you shake, I think, or double tap the Z button or something. You do something to do a wheelie and do a boost. And when I started doing that, I immediately flew through the entire rest of the cup. First place every single time, even getting hit with those blue shells and those combos and all that stuff. I went, oh, that's right. That's why I originally said I hate this game, because it's way too easy, because you can just basically boost through the entire game. And that's why I originally said that and found it so boring, is because, yeah, you can. You absolutely can. So I did that for the last one. I won Gold Cup without having to retry a single course because it's that easy. And so I think the rubber banding issues are the worst on the Wii version. I think the boosting and the motorcycles are garbage. And so the Wii is definitely my most hated experience, most hated Mario Kart game. Then I went to the 3DS version after that, and I think I played it the same night that I beat the Wii version because it was still pretty early in the evening and I had nothing to do. So I was like, yeah, I'll start the 3DS version. I think I played through the entire game in one sitting because I was having such a good time. It was such a breath of fresh air. It was such a more enjoyable experience after having the worst experience with the Wii version. So going through the 3DS version, it has a lot of really creative tracks too, which I adored. There's this, and they pull a lot of versions off of using the Wii. Not the versions of the Mario Kart Wii game, but the Wii itself. They do a lot of Wii Sports Resort tracks. So they have Woohoo Island, I believe. And that they pull a lot of tracks out of that. And there's this one that every once in a while they'll do a Mario Kart track that there's no circular lap system. It is a from point A to point B, downhill jam, if you will, type of style of race. And I like those tracks a lot. There's one on the Wii U/Switch, which I'll get to in just a second. But they do a couple of those. And there's one on Woohoo Island that they do. And the last quarter or the last third of the track is like this really long descent. And they implemented and they added, like a kite system or a parachute system to the kart. So like you can jump in the air, you can get these big jump boosts, and then you can glide down, which is a part of the Mario Kart 8 game. And it's a massive part of that game. But they implemented it and started it with the 3DS version called Mario Kart 7. Like, what a wonderful naming convention they started doing on the 7th game in the series. But basically, it's really cool because they have this really long descent and you're gliding and you can kind of like go to this like floating island platform or whatever. And it ends up at the very end of the course. But as I was flying, I got hit with a red shell. And this is where they kind of added in another kind of cheap mechanic. Red shells and blue shells, I think even green shells, fly. So if you're on the ground and your opponent is in the air and you have a red shell, you can shoot that and hit your opponent in the air from the ground. Ground to air turtle shells. So I was in the air. I was first place. I had a pretty good lead, and I got hit with a red shell in the air. And I fell down and I fell into not water to where Lakitu like comes and picks you up and puts you back on the course. You just have to drive. And it is all just like that Super Nintendo off-course style where you're just driving like 2 miles per hour. Like you could get out and walk faster than you can drive through the water and the sand because it's like a tropical island getaway or whatever. So like they have sandy beach. And I was just like watching everyone pass me by. And this is also where they started implementing like the different amount of characters and the point systems to where normally you would have to get third or I think maybe fourth place to advance. And if you get below that, you just have to retry the level. I think you can just straight up like get last place and still continue on in the cup. So I just was watching every person like drive by me, and I think I got like 8th place, and I was in first with like, if I didn't get hit with that red shell, I would have finished the course in probably 3 seconds and gotten first place. But I got hit with that red shell. I fell to the ground and then just had to drive off the beaten path for like 15 seconds. And I ended up getting 8th place. And I was just like, oh man, this sucks. But even with that one issue, like the game was really fun. I had a blast with it. And that takes us to Mario Kart 8, which is originally on the Wii U, but the Wii U sold so poorly that no one played it. So they re-released it with the DLC implemented, and that is called Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on the Switch. And they've been doing, over the last year, they've been doing Mario Kart 8 Deluxe DLC. So you have the original game. You have the Wii U DLC, which added some new cool tracks, like they have an Excite bike track, which is really cool. It's pretty short, but it's got the Excite bike music and all that stuff. And then they added in this weird, I don't know why they did this. Like it feels so scummy and out of character for Nintendo to do, but they added Mercedes-Benz DLC. So you have Mario Kart, where you're driving around in go-karts and now motorcycles, all cartoony style with the Mario characters, and you're flying around, shooting red shells at each other and all this. And one of the carts that you can unlock is a Mercedes-Benz like S-Class ZX3L or whatever. And it's just like, what is this doing in here? It is the most off-putting, unnecessary, weird DLC I think I've ever seen in my life. And it makes no sense. But that was also on the Wii U when Nintendo was really struggling. Fast forward to, 6 years later after the Switch, and it's just done gangbusters the entire time. So they keep adding DLC to this game, which is a re-release of an older game. But I really like the fact that they're doing these wave DLCs. And what these wave DLCs are is more cups. I think it's like 3 cups per wave or something like that. They just announced like yesterday that they're going to do wave 4 later on this month. I think like on the 24th or something. So I think that's really cool. And it adds more courses. I think it's like 1 or 2 completely new courses, but also those retro cups that have been a part of all the previous games, starting from Game Boy Advance, GameCube, DS, Wii, 3DS, and now the Wii U/Switch. So they're adding newer, older courses to this Switch version via DLC, and I think that's really cool. And I think the one thing that I do want to point out before I finish this is there is also another Mario Kart game after this. It was Mario Kart on mobile, like Android and iOS, which is called World Tour or something like that. I remember when it first came out, I downloaded and played it for like maybe 2 tracks and went, oh, I don't like this. It doesn't feel right. It's not the track design is not very good or interesting or anything like that from what I played. It just felt very bland. It was like, oh, this feels like a first draft, not like a full game. Like you're driving around in Tokyo, and it's like they're trying to make each level, like you have like Tokyo, New York, San Francisco, Seattle, all those types of stuff. And they take like very specific landmark things and put them in there, but it doesn't really have much more than that. And I was like, oh, this sucks. So I didn't really play that one, and that's not part of this Mario Kart series that I've been doing. I'm not gonna. And for the fact that they did add those tracks, some of those tracks, into the new Wave DLC for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and there's only one that's phenomenal, which is the Sydney, Australia course. Holy crap. I was smiling from ear to ear the entire course. And part of it is the music. The music is just amazing for this course. It is so diverse. It is so memorable. It is so enjoyable that I was just like, dude, this is really, really good. This is like a step above. This is what I imagine Mario Kart should be at all times. type of style to it. And so I was just blown away by how good that course was. Not just the creativity of the course, because they are good creative levels. Like in the 3DS, there's a couple tracks like I think it's Music World, where you have like bouncing music notes. You have these spiral down and spiral up turns that are keyboards or piano keys. And as you hit each piano key, they make the note of the piano. And it's just like, dude, there's so much little tiny creative things going around and going on with this level. It's like, this is what this should aspire. Every track should aspire to be. Not just a general theme, but, tying all that general theme together with little tiny unique things. It's called Music Course or something like pretty generic, Music Land or something like that. But it really reminded me of the old Silly Symphonies cartoon where they have the Romeo and Juliet like style narrative with the woodwind instruments and the string instruments, and like the kings are battling back and forth, and it's all like Navy and military themed too. So like they're shooting, cannons with musical notes and stuff, and they're blowing stuff out of the sky with the woodwind instruments and stuff. And it felt like that. It felt like a video game version of a racing game version of that cartoon. And I was just like, dude, this is really good. This is awesome. So I've been playing Mario Kart, and I played through all of those games: Super Nintendo, 64, Game Boy Advance, GameCube, DS, Wii, 3DS, and the Switch. So that's 8 Mario Kart games that I've played through and finished in roughly about a week, which was really fun. And I love doing that type of stuff. So once I finished the Mario Kart series, I was like, what do I do next? And I started playing, before I did the Mario Kart series, I loaded up a game that a lot of people have been really wanting to play, which is Atomic Heart. Atomic Heart is a BioShock style game. It's very narrative driven, which I'm all about. I love those styles of games. But it is taking place it's a Russian game where your character is in Russia or Russia adjacent or whatever, in the 1950s, I believe, with like a lot of, I can't remember the word. It's not autosyncratic, but something along the lines of that, where it doesn't mesh with the timeline exactly. It's not asynchronous. Man, I can't remember the name of it. But basically, it's like time out of time, where you're in the 1950s, but you're dealing with like sci-fi elements, that technology that doesn't even exist today in 2023. Like it doesn't make sense, but it's really cool. And I really, really liked it. I think I had a big issue with I still do. I haven't finished it. I'm apparently really not far into it. I looked up, or I just read an article this morning where it was like, oh yeah, it takes about 30 something hours to finish Atomic Heart. I'm like, dude, I played like 6. I've got a long way to go, and I don't have the time to devote to it right now, which sucks, because I'm really enjoying the lore, the ambiance, the environment. I'm enjoying pretty much everything about the game. Even the combat is pretty interesting. But it's the protagonist. The writing, not for the game, not like the story writing, the dialogue writing for the protagonist is some of the worst I've ever seen in any video game of all time. Remember Duke Nukem Forever? Dumb Duke Nukem Forever's writing down, and that's about how this character talks. It's so out of place, even with the weird style of the game and how the technology should not exist in 1950s and blah, blah, blah. This dude talks like a Marvel movie. It's super snarky. It's 2020 like internet writing on a character that lives in the 50s in Soviet Russia, who is a military guy. It is it's so off-putting that I started it up and I played about 10 minutes of the game on lunch night. And I stopped because I had to go to bed. I was like, dude, I got to get up in the morning for work. I cannot stay up until 3 o'clock in the morning playing this game. But I played it for like 10 minutes and I went, I don't know if I want to play this anymore. Because that's how bad the character's dialogue is. It is so just F-bomb, F-bomb, F-bomb over and over again. He sounds like a 12-year-old trying to impress his friends. It is so bad. It is so off-putting. It is so awful that like everyone should just be slapping the crap out of this character. Like every single person should be like, you're an idiot, we're not helping you. Or you're an idiot, I'm going to kill you. You're stupid, you're dumb, you're not worth living. You don't deserve to live. Die now, please. Like, it's just so bad. But everything else around it is fairly good. It's really interesting. It's held my interest the entire time playing, other than whenever he speaks, which is all the time too. So it's like, just shut up. There's like this catchphrase that they introduced. He says crispy critters like 20 times. Like, and that's his catchphrase too. Like, he's like, oh, crispy critters. And it's like, and even like your character has like this AI glove attached. And so you talk to that glove pretty much throughout the game, and that glove talks to you. And even the glove tries to use the catchphrase once before the guy does. And it's just like, what are you doing? What is this? This makes no sense. No person would ever say crispy critters. Like, oh, it is so awful. But besides that, besides the dialogue, and there is definitely another character. It's a robot vending machine, basically, that it's so bad it's laughable. It is like the horniest vending machine ever written, like the dialogue ever written, where it's just like, oh my gosh, what are you, 12? Like, come on, no one writes like this. No one wants, like, we're adults. I'm 37. I don't need this in my life. I don't need to have some fan fiction. Like, it reads like fan fiction from a 12-year-old who is really at that coming of age where it's just like, oh boy, you need to work some stuff out. You need a girl. All right. Like, go get a girlfriend first and then figure out what you want to write for dialogue, because it's just bad. It's bad like that. And besides the dialogue writing, the only other criticism I have is that, one, it tries really hard to be BioShock. The first half hour of that game it should just be a cutscene. And it's barely worth paying attention to because it is almost 100% BioShock. Like, I knew it was like BioShock-esque, but playing through that first half hour when you get to the title card, it's like, oh, this is BioShock Infinite with Russian. Like, legit. It is a city in the sky created by this person who wants to, make the population better or whatever. And it's just like, dude, this is 100% BioShock Infinite. City in the clouds. And it looks like pristine, and they're all praising the master or whatever. And it's just like, dude, come on. This is a little too much. It's a little too much. But besides those things, the game is really fun. The combat style is pretty diverse. I really like that the first weapon you get is a pickaxe, or not a pickaxe, like a fireman's axe. And there's body dismemberment. And like, I went up, I got the fireman's axe, and I saw a body on the ground, and I just hit it really quick because I was like, dude, I think there's going to be like zombies in this game and stuff. So I want to just kill all the bodies so that they don't, reanimate and come attack me. And so I hit the body, and the arm got lopped off. And I went, oh, no way. And so I started hitting the other arm and it got lopped off. And then I hit the leg and that got lopped off. And then the other leg and that got lopped off. And then I hit the head and that got lopped off. And then I hit the torso and that got cut in half. And I was like, oh man, this is so fun. Like, you don't see games do that anymore. Like just the kind of like body mutilation. For whatever reason, I'm sure there are reasons for it other than like practical for the video game itself, like the limitations of having those bodies in memory or whatever. But I really wish more video games did that type of stuff. Like, yeah, if I was 12 years old, I would just be doing that throughout the entire game and laughing my head off every single time. But honestly, it's just something fun. You know, it is one of those fun things to do. Like, man, you could just destroy this dead body. And again, my whole reasoning is I think there's zombies in this game, so I don't want to have them come out and attack me. And so, like, I'll just lop everyone's head off whenever I come to a character or a body that's on the ground or in a chair where they've been killed, you know, and they're just set dressing for the actual environment itself. I'll still lop their heads off because I know that there's definitely some sort of reanimation style of enemy to the game, and I don't want them to come at me because it's a pretty dark and scary game in certain aspects. So that's basically what I've been playing. I want to get back to Atomic Heart later today. I might play a little bit of it tonight. I might stream it. I'm not really sure, but I'm having an enjoyable time with it, more so than I thought I was at the beginning. If you like BioShock-style gameplay, play this game, disregard the first half hour until you get to the cutscene or the the title card, which I roughly about half an hour. Run through the first part of the game if you really don't care. I did that like after the first like 15 minutes. I was just like, dude, I just kind of want to get to the game. Like, I really hate when games start out with information dumps, exposition. That should be thrown in throughout the entire game. Give me the story as I progress through the game. Don't give me the story half an hour up front because I'm not going to know who any of these characters that they're talking. Dr. Rosanovich was the primary lead care physician, and Dr. Slonkov is the chief justice. And it's just like, I don't know who those are in this world. This is a brand new world to me. So why are you telling me this now? Why don't you tell it to me later? Because then they start introducing those characters later on. And I'm like, who? Who is this character? Oh, it's the guy that was referenced, 7 hours ago in the first half hour cutscene when I picked up the controller and I was going, okay, when do I get to play? 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 Oh, I can't play yet. Okay. You let me know when I can play game. And like, it's just a bad way of making a video game, but yeah, that's what I'm kind of playing. There's a couple games that I'm looking forward to. This year, like I've said before, is kind of a crazy year. There's only a couple games that I'm really looking forward to in the next month or so, month and a half, 2 months. As of right now, because new stuff is getting kind of surprise released a lot more, and I haven't really looked through the entire schedule, but the two main things is at the end of March 24th, is Resident Evil 4 Remake, which I still haven't finished the VR version. I really do want to get to that. I just don't know if I'm going to have time. My schedule is crazy. And so playing VR is kind of already a little bit rough. And then throwing my schedule on top of that, it's just, I don't know if I'm going to have time. So hopefully, if I don't finish that, maybe I'll play through the remake at least and have a good time. But that's pretty much it for March. April, it's again it's at the end of April 28th, which I am really excited about, even though I hate saying it. Star Wars Jedi Survivor. And this is the sequel to Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. And Fallen Order, I don't like the character Cal Kestis, I think his name is the one Like, they used the one character actor from, like, I think it was the Joker in one of the Batman Gotham DC WB shows or whatever. One of those crappy shows that no one watches. I just don't like him. But the gameplay itself is really fun, so I can definitely just go, yeah, whatever. I'm not really into the main character, but everything around it is actually pretty enjoyable. And so I loved it. Now that I do have that more Dark Souls experience of playing through and finishing Elden Ring, dude, I'm really excited to see my experience with this and see how well I do with that, because Jedi Fallen Order was the game that I played through first before. I played Dark Souls multiple times. I never liked it. I never finished it. I always got about 7 or 10 hours into it and just go, no, I hate this. This is dumb. Jedi Fallen Order always felt like a very fair game for the most part. And I know a lot of people played it on the consoles, and apparently there's a crap ton of issues even now. I never experienced any of those issues. I played it on PC, so I'm going to play it on PC again, and hopefully won't have any issues like I did, and just have a good time, because it seems like a really, really fun game. And a sequel to a really good game from 2019. I think it was 2019. I'm really excited about. And then that's pretty much what I'm looking forward to for right now. So we come to the end, which is Game of the Month. Game of the Month is Dead Cells for March, and I started playing this just a couple of weeks ago. And it's also part of why I didn't talk about it in the what I've been playing. I dropped about 8 hours into this game so far. I remember playing it back around the 1.0 release. I was like, okay, I've heard of Dead Cells for the last 3 years. It just came out of early access, 1.0. Let's try and see what this seems like. I played about half an hour of it. I did 2 runs, I believe, and I just kind of dropped it in the middle of the second run and just was like, dude, I hate this rogue style type of game, this run-based style where it's just do the thing, die, do the thing you just did again. Okay, you died again? Okay, do it again. 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 I don't like that style of game. Dead Cells, the combat is really fun. The environments are not that varied, but there is DLC and branching paths, so it allows a little bit of customization, which I did like. But it is a game that I kind of burned out fairly quickly on. I played, like I said, about 7 hours of it. I got really far on my 3rd run of the game. So I went fairly far on my first run. Second run, I went even further. Third run, I went 45-minute run. I did so well. And then I died and I just lost all momentum, all energy, all desire to play the game ever again. And I was writing on the Discord about it and stuff, and I was just like, I really liked the game. I really, really liked the game. I was having a lot of fun. But the fact that I died and then the game just says, all right, do it again. I just don't like those styles of games. But the reason why I wanted to play it, and the reason why I bought it in the first place, is because last month, Nintendo did their Direct, and they announced Castlevania DLC. And if you've been listening to this podcast, back in 2019, I did a whole Castlevania, set of episodes of the podcast because I went through all the Castlevania games. And I really, really enjoyed them. It's one of my favorite gaming series and franchises now, just because I thought they were so unique, so interesting, so fun. And they're doing DLC with Dead Cells of Castlevania. And I was like, dude, sign me up. I am ready to play this right now. Why can't I download it now? I got to wait till March 6th. Well, it's March 3rd. So I only got 3 more days to wait for this DLC to drop, which I'm very excited about. And so we made it our game of the month. And so I haven't had any time to play it because I traveled all day yesterday. I'm recording this podcast today, and I was in California for the last week. So I am excited to play some Castlevania DLC this weekend. But other than that, that's pretty much it for this podcast. Thank you very much for listening. I've been your host, Ryan Moore. You can catch all the articles. I did write up my thoughts on the Nintendo Direct that came out a few weeks ago. And then last week, Sony did their State of Play press conference. I got to think of a proper term that I want to start using for those things, but I think I'm calling the articles my thoughts on ... and those Direct and State of Play events. But I wrote down a little list of the things that I'm interested for when they showcase them and why I'm interested in them. The State of Play one was pretty awful. There's not really much from Sony that I'm looking forward to in the next 6 months. It's just the way it is. Like, nothing they showed really was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait. I was not thinking Nintendo was going to be that Nintendo was going to have anything either. I thought it would be exactly like what State of Play was, where it's like, there's like one thing that I'm really excited about Nintendo for, which is Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. But I've been writing that stuff off. Nintendo really did impress me with a lot of their things that they showed off. They showed off a new Samba Amiga game, which I don't think I'm going to really like. I think it's going to be a very childish game, but I'll try it out. And then there is the Metroid Prime remaster, and then they announced the Dead Cells Castlevania DLC. So if you want to have or see more of my thoughts and read more of my thoughts on that, you can go to gameordie.net. That is the website. I also do reviews for all the games that I beat, or I try to. Again, I'm traveling a lot lately, so and for the next 6 months or so. So I don't know how much, I started writing on the plane about the Mario Kart series, but that's kind of hard to collect my thoughts on 8 games on a plane. So we'll see how that goes. But if you want to read more, again, gameordie.net. There's also the YouTube channel, which I do throw up a video or two every once in a while. I'm going to try and start doing more videos again. It's just production has just been the last thing on my plate of other things that I have to deal with life. So, you get to what you can, when you want to. And that's how I approach all this stuff. Podcast, gaming, life in general. Hey, if I don't have the desire, I'm not going to force myself to. But I love doing this podcast. I want to do it. And so that's been the 66th episode of the Game or Die podcast. Like I said, my name is Ryan Moore. You can catch more of my thoughts and all those articles on gameordie.net. And like always, thank you. And I don't mean that sarcastically. It kind of came out sarcastically, but seriously, thank you for listening. If you listen, you like this, awesome. That's what I do it for is just so that other people can listen to my thoughts on video games. But that's going to do it for me. I'll catch you next time.